Hey, everybody. I know we're getting close to start time. Please don't start until I've verified that Judge Yao is actually here, though, or until we figured that out. I think they might be having some tech issues. Oh, okay. Hi. It does sound like you're having some tech issues, but you're here and you can see the cameras.
Okay. Can you see me?
Are you still
I can see you. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Here we
Okay. Looks like all 5
Now
judges are here. So
I got rid of a whole
start until
bunch.
they tell you the live stream is
now
set
it's
up.
really
Congratulations. Have a
Come
great
on.
final round.
Yeah, now it's stuck. No, I think maybe it just freed up. Let me try it again now that I've fixed that. I just closed out a bunch of windows or whatever. So let's try it again and see. Item 0, desktop picture, menu bar. Yeah, when I click on the profile, it just goes to infinity, like it's copying the web over and over and over again. It's just, I closed more windows and it's still not doing it. Click on impromptu, which I entered all the info in. What's that?
It looks like we've been given the go-ahead by Tab to get started. On behalf of all of the judges, competitors, I just want to say congratulations. It is no small feat to make it to the final round at Middle School Nationals, and you're here. So whatever happens in this round, make sure that you pat yourself on the back, take a big deep breath. You made it, and your judges are so excited. I love Informative. I am so excited to watch this round. I am so honored to be your judge. I wish you the absolute best of luck. I am more than happy to provide time signals if needed. Just let me know what you'd like. I am an extemp coach in my regular life, so I'm more than happy to provide any time signals you want. With that, any objection to the other judges if we get started? And unless there are any kiddos that need to go sooner, I have 5:39 as my first competitor. And if all the competitors wouldn't mind putting their title in the chat, I'm horrible at catching those. That would be really helpful for me. But otherwise, I'll go on mute. And 5:39, do you want any time signals?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Then I'll start my timer on your first word.
Sorry, I'm putting the thing in the chat.
Totally fine. Yep.
Okay.
And then when you're ready, I'm ready for you.
Can you see me and hear me? Yes, okay. If a year of being surrounded by electronic devices has taught us anything, it's that our technology knows us better than we know ourselves. I'm serious. TikTok algorithms have revealed my secret obsession with ASMR. And my Amazon app told me I shouldn't unionize, whatever that means. But Spotify taught me something about myself that I never thought possible. I love country music. I know, embarrassing, right? No shame. Carrie Underwood is my jam right now. I play her song Before He Cheats on repeat because what 13-year-old girl hasn't committed a misdemeanor because a boy was stupid? But as inspirational as Carrie's criminal confession is, and as much as I love hearing about how she smashed this guy's car with a baseball bat for cheating, I have to ask, why? Doesn't everybody cheat? Well, according to the Edutopia, yes, 95% of Americans have admitted to cheating in school. Academic dishonesty is alive and well in our schools. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be teaching you all how to get away with it. Calm down, I'm kidding. But considering that cheating is literally the one rule in education, it's important we do our homework. Oh my God, you didn't do your homework? It's fine, you could copy mine. First, we'll look at academic dishonesty's origins. Next, explore where it's most prominent. And finally, analyze the impacts in our society. So maybe next time, we'll think before we cheat. I cheated for the first time in kindergarten. We were playing Duck, Duck, Goose, and Becky was about to tag me, so I tripped her. 5 recesses and timeout later, I learned a valuable lesson. Don't get caught. First, we look at academic dishonesty's origins, and then explain why people do it. Cheating was alive and well way before Becky's bloody nose. The South China Morning Post suggests that the first recorded instances of cheating began in China in 650 AD. The Tang Dynasty established the civil service examination to give boys a sliver of hope for upward social mobility. In other words, the SAT. The only difference is the penalty for cheating was death. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and cheating became widespread across the United States. But sadly, no one's been beheaded for it. Across the globe, we all seem to agree that cheating is wrong. So why do we continue to do it? The short answer is, there isn't one. Stop looking for shortcuts. The Carnegie Mellon University says that kids are desperate, stressed, overworked, and constantly try to get ahead of each other. Kinda like a speech tournament. Super healthy. And speaking of healthy, apparently cheating is contagious. George Lucas Foundation 2018 says that some kids cheat to keep up with their peers socially and educationally. However, the Harvard Graduate School of Education argues and says that most kids cheat just to seem cool. While all these reasons are, well, reasonable, I have a simpler explanation. Technology has made cheating easier than ever. iPads, smartphones, computers have made cheating an absolute no-brainer. I mean, I could be reading from a teleprompter right now, and you would never know, but I'm not. Remember when I said that 95% of students admitted to cheating? Probably not, because apparently everybody knows their teachers. So let's see how creative kids are getting, and how parents, students, and even businesses are joining the party. Back in my parents' day, cheating was boring. Everybody would look over their shoulder to the one nerd in the classroom while the teacher crocheted ugly Christmas sweaters. Today's kids are far more creative. According to a random Reddit thread I'd rather not tell you the name of, high school students created an editable Snapple label to replace the nutrition panel with formulas. What the fructose? When I was in 7th grade, we would all rely on the good old nerd. If the answer was A, he would cough. If the answer was B, he would sniffle. And if the answer was C, he would get up and slap Becky. 6 referrals later, we needed a new strategy. But cheating in the 21st century has expanded far beyond students. Parents, teachers, and even businesses are joining the party. The Washington Post published pictures of parents scaling school walls, Spider-Man style, to give their kids answers. And according to the New York Times, in Kenya, industries have risen up to make it easier for families to cheat. Corporations are pumping out essays. Millions of essays are ordered annually. It's very easy to imagine that most of this cheating is done by lazy kids, but according to Dave Tomball, a professional contract cheater, the vast majority of cheating was done by desperate students. Most didn't speak English as their first language, and only about 15% were the lazy rich jerks that we typically imagine. Cheating has become a way of life. So what does it all mean? Let's look at the implications of academic dishonesty. First, on over-policing, and second, on student learning. According to NPR, many students get suspended when they are caught cheating. But discipline isn't particularly consistent. Minority students are far more likely than whites to get suspended, and being suspended is more closely linked to dropping out than failing grades. But over-policing extends beyond the classroom. According to Teen Vogue, Black mothers have been punished severely for just trying to give their children a better education. Kelly Williams Bowler was arrested and convicted of 2 felonies for sending her daughter to an out-of-district school. While most whites would just get a warning, Kelly's experience highlights how our education system, which is built on intense segregation, makes it difficult for parents to ensure that their children can have a good education. Many people also believe that education acts as a social equalizer. But according to the New York Times, the poorest children are falling even further behind. Guy Sense and Ralph Page, in their book, The Ironies of Education Reform, says that the ideology of equal opportunity in education obfuscates the fundamental idea that some kids are just set up to fail, and that the success of others always comes at the expense of those who fall behind. That's why, according to the Burlington Free Press, 25% of parents have admitted to cheating to getting their kids into college. Getting into elite schools is a zero-sum game. Parents know it, teachers know it, students know it, but we all cheat accordingly. We have created an education system that no longer fosters creativity or self-exploration, but instead incentivizes doing the bare minimum to move on to the next level. The educational industrial complex and the social context surrounding it is in a crisis driven by greed. Cheating is a symptom of what can only be described of as an educational arms race. And now back to jokes. Today we slashed a hole in all assumptions surrounding cheating by first looking at its origins, current approaches, and implications on our society. I have a long way to go before I get to college. But with my newfound love of country music, I think I'm going to go to Vanderbilt in Nashville. But I should probably stop lighting people's trucks on fire if I want to get in. Though it is a great deterrent, because the next time he cheats, it definitely won't be on me.
Excellent job. I'm just going to wait like a minute to make sure the judges all have a chance to finish. Okay, if any other judges need extra time, let me know. Otherwise, competitor 510, you're next on my list.
Hello. Just want to make sure that everyone can see and hear me. Thumbs up. Great. Okay.
Do you want any time signals?
I think I'm good, but thank you.
No problem. I'll start on your first word.
At the beginning of the Broadway musical Matilda is this song. My mummy says I'm a miracle, that I'm as tiny and as shiny as a mirror ball. You can be all cynical, but it's a trust empirical, that there's never been a miracle as me. If you haven't seen the musical, the irony of the song comes from the fact that these kids are nothing special, but their deluded parents believe they are miracles. Now me. I'm different. I am an actual miracle. I know this because my mother told me so. Okay, I know what you're thinking. But in my case, my mother has proof. You see, I have 17 brothers and sisters. But I am the only one who survived. Think about that. What are the odds that I would be here when 17 of my brothers and sisters aren't? But does my survival make me a miracle? On the night before Easter in 2012, Carol Isaac found a potato chip inscribed with the face of what she believed to be Jesus. She declared the chip a true miracle, and it made national news. Was that a miracle? The Oxford English Dictionary defines a miracle as an act demonstrating control over nature and serving as evidence that the agent is either divine or divinely favored. But we have a hard time understanding the nature of miracles or even agreeing that they exist. If a miracle is an option, though, it changes everything. First, we will go back in time to explore the history of miracles. Then we will discover how miracles are perceived today. Finally, we will find the mathematical reasoning behind miracles. So first, let's pick up our playbills and get ready to hear about the history of miracles. If you haven't guessed, I was born with the assistance of in vitro fertilization. When I was a mere 6 cells, I spent 10 months frozen. That was cold. Louise Brown, the first IVF baby, was born in 1978. It had never happened before. And that year, she was the only one. She was a mathematical improbability, a miracle. Flash forward 30 years to 2008, when I was born. There were over 61,000 IVF babies born that year, accounting for 1.6% of the total births. Granted, that's a very small amount, but still, 61,000 is a lot. In 1886, Carl Benz created the first horseless carriage. For some people, their first glimpse of this miraculous new technology, traveling at a blistering 8 miles an hour, caused them to faint, to cheer. Now, let me ask you this. When you looked at your car this morning, did you start weeping and cheering? What about when it went from 0 to 60 miles per hour in less than 3 seconds? Yeah, me neither. Maybe true miracles are only something that happened in history. Maybe we need to look further back in time to find those true miracles. You know, there are historical accounts of Jesus performing miracles, like the time he cured a leper. Amazing, because leprosy is totally incurable. Oh, wait, that's not quite true. There's something called multi-drug therapy, and it is 100% effective in curing leprosy. Of course, it wasn't around in 30 AD, but we have it now, so are miracles simply ahead of their time or something we haven't seen before? If I'd been the first IVF baby born in 1978, would I be a miracle too? But since I was born in 2008, I'm just a run-of-the-mill, nothing special. Let's watch the curtain rise and examine how miracles are perceived today. My mother grew up on a remote farm, and when she was my age, she had to hike a country mile through the relentless snow every morning to catch her school bus. She tells me about this all the time, usually when she thinks I'm taking my amazing life for granted. Apparently, I have no idea how good I have it, but I am grateful. I'm just used to cars and the internet. I also can't imagine a world without modern medicine, airplanes, or air conditioning. Inventor and futurist Ray Kurzweil argues in his Law of Accelerating Returns that we won't experience 100 years of progress in the 21st century. It will be more like 20,000 years of progress. These aren't miracles, they're expectations, they're birthrights, they're gimmies. We deserve them more. I want more. Oh, I'm sorry. Did that last bit sound entitled? Maybe a little bratty? It must just be me, because I know you would never complain about your internet connection or expect a tiny piece of technology in your pocket to do basically anything and everything. Let's consider for a second the impossible. That my mother actually has a point, and an attitude of gratitude is what is needed. Psychologists say that things we regularly receive, we quickly come to expect and take for granted. This phenomenon is called familiarization. In order to gain a perspective, we need to defamiliarize ourselves and take a step back. And by a step back, I mean a big step back. Finally, we can give a standing ovation and ponder the mathematical reasoning behind the events of miracles. Astronomer Frank Drake calculated the odds of civilization developing on a habitable planet to be less than 1 in 10 billion trillion. For the first 4.5 billion years, the Earth didn't have any intelligent life at all. 300,000 years ago, the first humans arrived. But it wasn't until 130,000 years ago, for reasons no one fully understands, our brains started to go through an unprecedented period of growth, which ended less than 50,000 years ago, when we gained our current cognitive capabilities. Dr. Richard Klein, a Stanford archaeologist, hypothesizes that it was a chance genetic mutation that rewired our brains in a critical way that allowed us to conceive and model complex social circumstances. Of all the life forms on Earth, for reasons that are mysterious at best, Homo sapiens became the planetary lottery winners. And if those odds seem impossibly small, they don't consider all the things that didn't go wrong. an asteroid colliding with the planet, a random illness, or war wiping us out. Everything had to go right, and nothing too bad had to go wrong. And that's miraculously just what happened. Then there's the probability that you, the exact person that you are, would come to exist. Dr. Ali Binzanier calculated the odds that your parents would meet to be about 1 in 20,000. If your mom has 100,000 eggs and your dad makes 4 trillion sperm, the chances that the exact egg and sperm that became you would meet are 1 in 400 quadrillion. That is to say, the odds of your existence are basically 0. This is great news for you, because it means you're a miracle too. The circumstances of my birth might have slightly elevated the improbability of my existence, but when we are dealing with such slim chances that life would have developed at all, it's infinitesimally small. Miracles are not something you have to search through history to find. We are the miracle, and we are surrounded by miracles each and every day. I was one of 4 embryos transferred, but the only one to survive. I will never know why I made it and my brothers and sisters did not. Was it luck? Chance? It was a miracle. Thank you. And for your reference, I got a time of 9 minutes and 54 seconds. Thank you. Thank you for judging.
Exact same time I got. Good job. All right, I'll give the other judges a minute or two to finish collecting their thoughts. And next up is speaker 551. Speaker 551, do you want any time signals?
No, thank you. Can you hear me and see me all right?
Yes, I can. Any judges need additional time? Hearing no objection, I'll start on your first word.
I love history. I have always been fascinated by the events that have shaped the modern world. As a child, I was especially interested in revolutions and the brave individuals who risked their lives so that others could live freely. This year in history class, we learned about the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And I was so excited because I knew chronologically we'd be learning next about my parents' home nation, Haiti, and how it gained its independence. I was so ready to live the stories of Louverture and Dessalines. In fact, every New Year's when my family ate soup jumeau, I asked again and again to hear the story on how the nation came to be. And I couldn't wait for my classmates to hear that story as well. So then we started off with a chapter on Napoleon. And then Bismarck unifying Germany. Apparently, my people's story had no place in history. The Haitian Revolution and the collective reaction to it by Western colonizers helps explain why. According to the World Bank, Haiti remains, to this day, one of the poorest nations on the planet. Context is always key. This informative speech is my attempt to help contextualize our story because others won't. Today, we'll look at the causes of the revolution, how it played out, and the larger ramifications of what scholars call the only successful slave revolt in human history. Soup jumeau is a delectable yet traditional Haitian dish that roughly translates to pumpkin soup. The first step to making it is gathering your ingredients. Similarly, every successful revolution needs to begin with a couple basic ingredients, namely discontent and weak leadership. Haiti's history began in 1496 when Spain established the first permanent European settlement in the Western Hemisphere, called Santo Domingo. About 200 years later, Spain seceded the western part of the island to France. According to financial analyst Colin McKay, the Pearl of the Antilles, as it was referred to at the time, was one of France's most prized possessions due to its coffee and sugar productions. But in order to run these massive plantations on the island, the Encyclopedia Britannica states on March 13, 2022, that the French enslaved nearly 1 million Africans near the eve of the revolution, and they outnumbered colonists 10 to 1. Malnutrition, starvation, and workplace deaths were endemic. Colonists grew fear. Any whisper of revolt would end up in brutal torture or even execution. Next, discontent amongst slaves wasn't enough to spark a successful revolution on its own. While it did provide the tinder, the strong control measures prevented these social orders from being set ablaze. But the French Revolution changed everything. According to historian Claudia Sutherland, the French Revolution's Declaration of the Rights of Man gave slaves and abolitionists a new language to push for emancipation in France. The document stated unequivocally, "All men are born and remain free." As the revolution grew more radical in Paris, there are many who could no longer justify the obvious hypocrisy in slavery. Turmoil in France also caused mismanagement. As governments rose and fell due to mob violence in Paris, they often changed colonial leadership to reflect their new philosophies. Some governors literally found out they were fired as they were arriving on the island. This lack of consistency showed that there was no longer a strong bureaucracy to maintain control. Making soup jamu is an intense, multi-day process that has always brought my family together. The revolution was more slightly complicated. Next, we'll explore how the slaves rose up, ultimately formed an independent nation. On August 22, 1791, the Haitian Revolution began on the Night of Fire, when over 100,000 slaves burnt plantations and executed their former masters. This event went on to inspire former slaves Toussaint Louverture to join in the cause, according to historian Devick McNally. Led by Louverture, the former slaves quickly made progress using guerrilla tactics, fire, and machetes. Initially, Louverture and his army fought for the Spanish against the French. But after lobbying by Black Jacobins in France, which convinced the French National Convention to emancipate the slaves in 1794, Louverture switched sides. Overwhelmed, the Spanish retreated and a tenuous peace arose. But not after long, infighting began, and one of Louverture's subordinates, André Rigaud, rose up to challenge Louverture. According to historian Jennifer Pontius Mandenberg, Louverture won the war, promulgated the Constitution, and named himself governor for life. By this point in our story, the revolutionary experiment was over with in France, and Napoleon Bonaparte had come to power. While France was still nominally in control of Haiti, Napoleon was bleeding money and desperately needed to regain the revenue that Saint-Domingue used to provide. In one of his biggest mistakes, Napoleon ordered a massive military expedition to restore slavery back on Haiti. The Haitian armies refused to meet up with the French in battle and burnt cities to the ground instead of surrendering them. The French ended up capturing and imprisoning Louverture, who ended up dying in a French jail cell. But the French would never end up winning the war. Disease ravaged Napoleon's troops, and new military leader Jean-Jacques Dessalines would end up wiping out the rest of the French at the Battle of the Vetere. On January 1st, 1804, he signed the Declaration of Independence and identified the new nation as Haiti, the name which was originally used by the indigenous Taino people. During slavery, Haitians were not allowed to eat soup jamu because it was a French delicacy. After they won their freedom in 1804, the former slaves celebrated with feasts that featured the dish that has inspired traditions to this day. Similarly, the effects of the revolution still have lasting impacts on financial policy and education. After the war was won, freedom from slavery lasted, but freedom from debt didn't. According to Hiatun Koi from ABC News, the cost of French diplomatic recognition was 100 million francs in amenities, or 21 billion US dollars today. University of Virginia professor Marlon Dual argues that by forcing Haiti to pay for their freedom, the French ensured that the Haitian people would continue to suffer the economic effects of slavery for many generations to come. According to Greg Roldowski from NPR, Haiti had to take out multiple loans from French banks with hefty interest rates. Laurent Dubois concludes in his book, Haiti, The Aftershocks of History, that by 1914, 80% of Haiti's budget went into French banks. That is slavery by a different name. The Haitian Revolution gives us the blueprint to confront white supremacy today. It involves battlefield tacticians, human rights thinkers, and civil leaders who can inspire and inform our activism today. Obviously, the revolution had its problems, but all the lessons, good and bad, are only accessible if we teach people about the event. The National Council for Social Studies in 2020 states that beyond a mention of Nat Turner, students rarely learn about slave revolts and rebellions. The Haitian Revolution seldom shows up in curriculum guides and standardized tests, and chapters about Haiti in textbooks are minimal. According to Dr. Bertrude Albert in 2019, the Haitian Revolution was the beginning of the end of the slave trade. It shaped modern notions of equality. It inspired multiple revolutions on many different continents and was the reason why the U.S. was offered the Louisiana Purchase. Haiti's history is all of our history. It's time we learned it. In January of 2019, the American president of the time called my homeland, and I'm paraphrasing, a crap hole country. He conveniently left out French extortion and European isolation. He also left out that in 1915, the U.S. invaded Haiti and occupied it for 19 years. Context is everything. The reason why history repeats itself is because people don't pay attention to our past. Today, we learned that the causes of the revolution, how it played out, and the larger implications of the Haitian Revolution. I hope that by sharing my people's story, I can help change the world for the better. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Just going to give the judges some time to get their comments down. The next up is going to be speaker 501.
Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Do you want any time signals?
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Any objections from any of the judges? Anyone need more time? Hearing none. Speaker 501, I'll start on your first word.
I've got to be honest with you all. My sister and I are Tony Stark stans. The Iron Man films are top-tiered MCU. They're packed with all kinds of cool gadgets, from a battery-powered artificial heart to a sociopathic piece of artificial intelligence that tried to destroy the planet by taking a country out of the ground and dropping it from a few miles in the air. That was a dark time for Tony Stark, but it doesn't take away how amazing his technology is and how he became an actual hero instead of a corrupt arms dealer. That's when I tried figuring out if our modern technology can also have a role in defeating our everyday villains. According to criminal defense lawyer Robert Stahl on October 4th, 2018, smart devices has become a significant facet to criminal investigation. Devices like Fitbit and your phone track your heart rate, movement speed, and timestamps your location, making it easier to prove or negate alibis, and thus making it an even more reliable kind of witness. A witness that is not going to lie. So today, let's explore how smart devices solve crime with the background, applications, and implications of crime investigation and how it's changed. Some people say that Tony Stark is actually a villain in the MCU. Not for his previously mentioned arm deals or for creating Ultron, but for his hideous goatee. And honestly, I have to agree. So let's talk about the background with both how crimes are solved initially and how it was revolutionized with our understanding of blood. First, before smart devices, violent criminals weren't caught. According to Universal Class Last Access on July 16, 2021, in the ancient times, the manner of death was naturally assumed by where and how the victim had been found. A man found lying bloodied along the side of a road would have possibly been dragged by a horse. Crimes were initially solved by assumption unless there were witnesses. Inferences and hunches were detectives' reliable rationale, but often led to faulty research, contaminated crime scenes, and a lot of cases solved simply by rumor. Back in the yesteryears of crime investigation, criminals and burglars were rarely caught with their pants down. Fortunately, the discovery of forensic science revolutionized investigation as we know it. Next, forensic scientists, or crime scene justifiers, has drastically changed our approach to solving crime. According to Crime Scene Investigator Network Last Access on July 16, 2021, properly collected and preserved blood evidence can establish a strong link between an individual and a criminal act. Our novel understandings of blood, DNA, ancestry, and genetics gives investigators a better and more accurate ability to catch the criminal. Here's how it works. A forensic scientist goes to the crime scene to find and collect any blood samples that can be used as evidence. The blood samples, if any, are then sent to a laboratory to be analyzed. Results of who this blood belongs to is then sent to investigators. This doesn't always come with a concrete name, address, and astrological sign, but it does come as a set of genomes to save and compare later. Tony Stark's choice of facial hair is a crime against humanity, but the worst facial hair has to be the Star-Lord's sideburns and a disconnected mustache? Whoa! Get your priorities straight, Peter. It's time to check out some applications in two parts: how smart devices innocuously came into our lives, and how they track us in even more innocuous ways. First, the development of smart devices has moved into our daily lives without us realizing it. Aging in Place, Last Access on July 16, 2021 states, in the past, writing a letter, sending faxes, or finding a wired telephone was the best way to communicate remotely with someone. But nowadays, we can just call and text each other without leaving the comfort of our own home. Our communication has drastically changed over the past several decades. Now, you can even FaceTime or video chat someone from the other side of the world. These innovations became particularly important during the COVID-19 pandemic, where Zoom worked as the primary mode for teaching, learning, and connection. While not perfect, these smart devices has gradually altered multiple facets in our daily lives, creating a future hardly anyone could have predicted. Next, recordings from smart devices are being used as evidence. If you have a Google Smart Display or an Amazon Echo, The devices are actually listening in more than you think. In fact, according to Wired on August 31st, 2020, after an altercation between two people, an individual was stabbed and died soon after. Fortunately, Alexa was on. Alexa records every word uttered in her presence and documents these conversations in an ongoing transcript. So police use Alexa's transcript to catch and jail the suspect, effectively making Alexa evidence and a witness at the same time. I like to think the biggest villain Tony Stark ever faced was not Ironmonger or Captain America, but rather himself. JK, we all know it was Thanos, like, duh! Finally, let's check out some implications with both how crime investigation is still evolving and the evolution of smart homes. First, how we execute criminal investigation is still changing. According to the LA Times on December 8th, 2020, the infamous Golden State Killer was found and arrested due to a family member taking a DNA test. And while most crime TV shows like to believe that they have a full roster of everyone's fingerprints, DNA, and mugshots at their disposal, that's not actually true. DNA from a crime scene can usually only be matched if your DNA was already on file. Unfortunately, DNA from the Golden State Killer had no matches for decades, making the case go cold. However, when a family member of the murderer took a genealogy test, police suddenly had a DNA match belonging to a man far too young to have committed those crimes. However, with the healthy amount of snooping, investigators finally solved the long-abandoned case. Genealogy testing gives detectives the ability to assess DNA away from the crime scene and has opened opportunities to find the parties at fault. Next, smart homes. If any of you have ever watched the 1999 Disney original movie Smart House, you know what I'm talking about. According to Time magazine on July 25th, 2019, technology is growing at such a rapid rate that it's not unimaginable to have built-in tech that tracks our health without even attaching to us. Your Fitbit, phone, and even some gaming consoles track your health and are already being used in criminal investigation. This heart rate and health detection coming from smart homes are utilized to call emergency services or notify proper authorities. We already see other devices like delivery drones and unmanned robots who operate with a single request. So imagining a house that operates without request isn't too far-fetched. And so, after diving into the background, applications, and implications of how smart devices solve crime, and the MCU's poor choice of facial hair, we can understand that sooner or later, technology as we have imagined it will become a reality and become a part of us, literally.
Awesome. Thank you.
May I please have my time?
9:32.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Speaker 503. Awesome. Speaker 503, do you want any time signals?
No, that's okay.
Okay. All right. Any judges not ready? Okay, Speaker 503. Whenever you're ready, I'll start.
Can you guys hear me and see me?
Yes.
Growing up, I've always loved playing soccer. The batting a ball around with your feet for 20 minutes shouting, "Manos!" when a player tries to grab the ball with his hand. And when you score, a man shouts, "Goal!" For what feels like 30 minutes, what's not to like? That's why, pre-COVID, my friends and I decided to create our own soccer team. Not to brag, but we're pretty good. But there was this one time when we beat a team so bad that one of the players from the losing team said, "You only won because you're Mexican." I was shocked. I thought the field was safe from discriminatory racist comments. However, according to the conversation on July 14, 2021, racism has long been found in European sports and is intensified when players of color are put in the spotlight during major competitions. Professional sports still perpetuate racist ideas and seek to maintain these ideas via the lack of diverse representation, toxic masculinity, and open statement against the Black Lives Matter movement. So today, we're going to look at the background, applications, and implications of racism in sports. In quarantine, I couldn't play a lot of soccer, so I switched my free time to gaming. My favorite game to play was Mortal Kombat, since you're this ripped athlete with superpowers, but without any of the blood, sweat, and tears to get there. Now, let's look at the background of both sports history and how they were interrogated. First, professional sports are historically racist. According to Sports Tech Biz on June 5, 2020, for the entire history of modern sports, race has been a critical dividing concept. The role of race in sports is complex. During the 1900s, the majority of African Americans and Latinos were banned from professional competitions. Non-white communities were often racially profiled and never had the opportunity to share their voices, play in competitive sports, and represent their communities at the Olympics. This reprimand discouraged communities of color from participating in competitive sports and seeing it as a valid career opportunity. Next, when and how were sports racially integrated? According to Sports Conflict, on July 23, 2021, American professional sports were segregated in the 20th century, preventing people of color from participating in sports with white players and athletes. Black Americans later made the Negro League, where African Americans and, to a lesser extent, Latin Americans were permitted to participate without white athletes judging them based on their race. Sports did not begin interrogating until the 1950s, and even then it was a gradual process in allowing players of color to play on the field and attain the spotlight. I don't know if any of you heard of this niche video game, but it's called FIFA. And you can play as any soccer team against any team you want. It's a great game, but as a FIFA head, I know it could sound a bit strange to you normies out there. It's time to check out some applications and how these race ideas affect us interpersonally and sports target intersecting identities. First, these racist ideas affect us interpersonally. The New York Times on July 14, 2021, England's improvement in the final caught the nation's attention. Old racial tensions were brought back to light when England fans booed British soccer players who took a knee to protest against racial injustice. 3 of England's black players later faced racial abuse after England lost in the final. Racist rhetoric flooded newspapers and the nation alike, whereas players of color were targeted and harassed. Teams from other nations who defeated England's team were previously also chastised and attacked with racial slurs. proving that even centuries after the British colonization, these racist ideologies still exist today. Next, professional sports discriminate against intersectional identities. According to Taylor and Francis, on March 11, 2021, about 1/3 of adults perceive sports as unwelcoming to LGBTQ athletes, and 40% report experiencing sports-related mistreatment. Sports are often associated with masculine, cisgender, and heteronormative ideas, but are mostly recognized as primarily American. For most, that means white. Intersex and transgender people already face significant discrimination on the field, whether that be in higher testosterone levels or people simply not recognizing that trans people exist. These problems are exacerbated if they are brown. Racist ideologies have portrayed brown people as bestial, feral, and aggressive, untamable animals that possibly can't stand at the same height as civilized white people. While this language has mostly been phased out of our vocabulary, these implicit biases still exist on different levels. So if brown queer people don't completely abide by white gender standards, then they are deemed as nothing but an unfair threat. You know what's a real unfair threat? Owls. They're nocturnal birds of prey who like to hunt and kill at night. Finally, let's look at some implications and how sportcasters had no choice but to recognize excellence in sports from POC athletes. First, these racist ideas will never fully go away. According to FICE.org, on May 14, 2021, a majority of Black and Latinx players face discrimination not only on the field but in public, such as comments from racist fans, in private through social media, and institutionally as a lack of effective management and coaching opportunities. This all-encompassing discrimination creates a holistically toxic experience for players, where their ability in the field is not only praised, but linked directly to their worth as a person. Finally, sportcasters had no choice but to recognize excellence in sports from people of color. Latino Life Last Access on July 28, 2021 reported top 10 Latin American sportswomen in accordance to the success at the Olympics. For instance, Catherine Embarguin, who is deemed a multi-talented athlete in different disciplines, such as high jump, long jump, and triple jump. Or Marta Vieira de Silva, who is named as one of the most well-known soccer players in the world. These athletes of color use their platforms to instill more diversity on the field and have become inspirations for the next generation of players to come. So today, we looked at the background, applications, and implications of racism in sports. My run-in with the racist team left me changed but more aware of our world. Racism in sports will not leave, but hopefully knowing more about this phenomenon, you can recognize these dangers in your own lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And our last speaker of this wonderful round, speaker 545. Are you ready?
Yeah. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Do you want any time signals?
No, thank you.
Okay, then I'm ready when you are. Any judges need more time? Okay, ready when you are.
Okay, thank you. When we were younger, we all had a favorite movie. From Cinderella to Toy Story, there was always one that was just a little bit better than the rest. For me, that was Disney Pixar's Inside Out. Now, I know what you're thinking. Inside Out, Really, out of all the movies in this world, you chose Inside Out? But hear me out. I loved it because I could relate to it. Like Riley's crazy parents, awkward new friends, and crazy emotions. But could you imagine Inside Out without those varying emotions? Wouldn't it be such a boring movie? On a more extreme level, could you imagine a life without emotions? Believe it or not, there are actual people who don't experience any emotions whatsoever. And it's much more common than you think. Helpline.com states that almost 1 in every 10 people partially or completely lack the ability to feel emotions. So today, let's talk about the history of emotionless people, then move on to the science of having no emotions, before finally looking at the perspective of an emotionless person. Emotions are complex and often misunderstood. Scientists say that attempts to treat psychopathy date back to the year 5000 BC. Oh, and when I say treatments, I don't mean medicine. I meant that they quite literally hammered a rock into their heads to make them better. Yeah, that clearly didn't work. However, as time went by, our understanding of emotions has grown from cracking our skulls open to actual treatments like therapy. But one question has always remained unanswered, and that is, are there really people who don't feel any emotions at all? Well, the simple answer to that question is yes. It all started in 1973, when psychotherapist Peter Emmanuel Sifnios noticed a minor change in a specific group of his patients that are going through psychotherapy. When using psychotherapy, which had been one of the most effective treatments at the time, he noticed that it wasn't really helping them. Sifnios' patients had trouble not only describing their feelings like the other psychopaths, they also had trouble figuring out if they were feeling anything at all. He used the word alexithymia to describe them. Alexithymia means no words for emotions in Greek. Before alexithymia became a diagnosis, it was commonly misdiagnosed with psychopathy. There is one major thing that differentiates alexithymia from psychopathy. When someone is a psychopath, they can still feel emotions. They can feel happy, sad, or angry, but they wouldn't be able to describe them, meaning they wouldn't be able to put their emotions into words. The same thing would happen with an alexithymic person, but they wouldn't feel any emotions at all. Because of the similarity in symptoms, there was a common misconception between the two illnesses. According to SpectrumNews.org, alexithymia has also been misdiagnosed with autism. Although it is more likely for an alexithymic person to have autism, not all alexithymic people have it, the same way that not all autistic people have alexithymia. Because both autistic and alexithymic people tend to think more cognitively rather than emotionally, they were also commonly misdiagnosed. Alexithymia isn't a very well-known illness, but it is one that many struggle with. Alexithymia has been misdiagnosed for a long time with things like psychopathy, sociopathy, and even autism. But there is an entirely different science to it. There are two types of alexithymia, the neglect type and the non-neglect type. Let's start with the non-neglect type, meaning that you either have it by birth or because of physical brain damage. Having alexithymia by birth meant that you went through a genetic polymorphism. Genetic polymorphism, I know it's a big word, isn't the same as a mutation. Polymorphism means many of the same, while a mutation means an alteration, making it better or worse. A good example of genetic polymorphism are blood types. There are multiple types of blood, but none of them have a specific advantage or disadvantage to the rest. Scientists say that a genetic polymorphism in serotonin, also known as the happy hormone, can lead to primary alexithymia. Another cause of non-neglect type alexithymia is physical brain damage. The insula is a part of our brain that takes care of our social emotions, such as love, pride, and disgust. It is located deep inside the lateral sulcus of our brains. When there is an impairment or problem with this part of the brain, that can tend to us not being able to properly feel emotions. meaning we'd have primary alexithymia. The more severe the impairment, the higher you are on the alexithymic spectrum. Now, brain damage plays a huge role in causing alexithymia, but so does childhood trauma. This is known as a neglect type. A study done by the NCBI, or National Center for Biotechnology of Information, showed that out of a total of 1,018 participants that were victims of childhood neglect, 16.5% of them had alexithymia. This is no small number. Childhood trauma plays such a big role in causing alexithymia. But what surprised scientists the most was that children who were victims of physical and sexual abuse had no alexithymic-related symptoms. Those who were emotionally neglected and told that their emotions didn't matter were the ones with it. It's crazy to think our brains are willing to change so easily after being told something is bad or wrong. There have definitely been times where all I wanted was to feel no emotions at all. And I think a good amount of you could relate. Little did I know the struggles I would have faced without them, because from what I've heard, living with alexithymia isn't fun. Jeff Bird, who is a professor in psychology at Oxford University, states, "There are those who know the difference between a smile and a frown, but they don't know what this actually means. That is quite strange. And by all means, it is very weird. Imagine not being able to feel the basic human emotions. That is a life I know I would never want to live in. What makes matters worse is that in the society we live in, any change in you, whether that be physically, mentally, or socially, you're looked down upon because you don't fit into the societal norms. Obviously, an alexithymic person isn't your average human, but they still are human. Just because they think differently doesn't mean that they can't make logical decisions. An article published by the USA Today showed that out of a total of 1,000 people diagnosed with some kind of mental illness, 2/3 of them have stable jobs. Alexithymic people could do really well in logic-based jobs, such as computer programming, accounting, and, ironically, neuropsychology. At the same time, their emotionless way of living can lead them to not marrying, being distant from family and friends, and not being able to maintain jobs that require emotional thinking, like a nurse or a teacher. Alexithymic people can also be really good at hiding their illness from the world. At the same time, not a lot of them know that alexithymia exists. Although Inside Out would have been a terribly boring movie without the emotions, an emotionless life may not be so bad. Alexithymia is such an unknown illness, but that just means there's so much more to learn about it. If we can figure out how and where it comes from, we can really understand the day-to-day lives of an alexithymic person. And then we can find a cure and help all of those suffering. We just have to take it step by step. So maybe, just maybe, one day we'll all be able to smile and actually mean it. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for our audience. I wish you all the best of luck. Congrats.
Can I know my time?
9:05.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for judging. Bye.
Thank you for judging.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.